Good evening, ladles and jelly spoons. I am back after a 2-week break. I'm also broke. So if you do like what I do on this channel and you do want to support it, please do offer us a small donation, just as a hello and a thank you. But that aside, I had a great time away. It was really good to spend time in the bush with like 6 days with no signal, no Wi-Fi, no internet, no data, no phone calls, no SMS. Was fantastic. But in the meantime, things have started to accelerate. I feel that social media is starting to bubble over. There's a lot of anger out there. There's a lot of people trying to understand what's happening in their countries. And one of the best people that I've discovered who understands the issues, who understands Islam, who understands the West, who understands the Islamic mindset, is my guest Ibn Alwarraq, who is an incredibly knowledgeable man. And thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you for having me again. I thought I would scare you off the last 2 times, but apparently you're brave enough to do it.
No, dude, seriously. Any man who's been married realizes that there are things more scary than you and me, right?
Oh, yes.
You know, because I used to think I was dangerous, and then I got married, and I realized that I am nothing. You know, yeah, I know what's scary, and it's not me. So, yeah. But that aside, man, tell me just as an old fan question, and hello to the audience. So, welcome, Villainous. Good to see you again. Adiz for 11. Yes, I am back. Gog and Magog, welcome. We've got Villainous again saying peace, everyone. Ashambod, Adiz. Yeah, nature is great. It was really hot back home. But yeah, it was really wonderful. Just a question though, do you sense that there is concern, there is worry, there is fear, and there is agitation. There's a sense of growing fear, but also a sense of growing anger on social media with what looks to be like a serious Islamic capitulation on behalf of Western politicians, even the king,
Uh,
and others.
no, I think there is a sense of illumination. Let me explain what I mean. Sometimes you might have either a book in a language you don't understand, or you have a letter that's in a dark room. And once the light gets on, or you learn the language, you discover what actually that book is. What is going on in Europe, North America, even in Australia, New Zealand, has been going on since the 70s. The only difference is we didn't have social media where people actually discuss these things. We didn't have YouTube where these things are brought up. And we did, until a few years ago, had a kind of blank block from either Facebook, Google, and others for
Hmm.
certain information to come out. And in the last few years, where the information will start coming out, and people like you, where somebody says, oh, that's wrong, and your immediate response, I've seen it several times, how about you come and challenge me and correct me? And this is one. So a lot of Muslims find that it's Muslim apologists, the ad hominem and calling you names, it's the easiest way, not discuss the idea. Then
Hmm.
add to that, in the last 10 years, in several scenarios, people actually saw um, how it looks like when Islam is taking control over a country. You had
Hmm.
Egypt, you had Libya, now you have Syria. And so the difference is, I don't know if you've seen, I'm so sorry, I had to see some of them. Some of the images were coming out of Syria in the last few weeks.
Horrific.
But here's the thing, that's exactly what was happening in the last 1400 years. They just didn't have video camera. The
Horrific.
way people were treated now, it's probably is less violent than it used to be, because now they do AK-47. When you read the Sirah, there are people who are being torn apart by horses. So this kind of violence, that was the standard operating procedure. As an Egyptian, one of the ways that Egypt became an Arabic-speaking country, anybody who would speak Egyptian language would have his tongue cut off. So the level of violence, it's always there. It's in the books. It's we just didn't see it, and now it's coming to the surface, and people going, wow, so this stuff is actually true. And the sources are available. So it's not kind of a revelation more than illumination to the people. The stuff it's been said by so many people in the last 50 years. Just people think, oh, it is real.
Right.
So you can no longer ignore it, because in the 70s, the outside France, the population of Muslims, and I am going to use the term on a spectrum, whether they are Orthodox Muslims or nominal, Eid and Ramadan Muslims, the one who just take it as a social identity. But the 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 level of their existence wasn't that big. But now, since 2011, when Angela Merkel basically opened the border of Europe
Hmm.
unchecked, you start getting a group of people where what currently you have in Europe is an invasion.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not hidden, because you have I've seen people in Germany, France, Britain, uh, not Poland and not Hungary. In Sweden is like this now. Our country we're taking over. I've seen a British Muslim journalist that said, if you don't like Islam, you can leave.
Yeah.
So it's now telling, and so it's coming. It's coming to fruition. You start seeing what it's going to look like with above 5% Muslim population. If it's increased, then the program you're doing now would be hardly done anywhere,
Yeah.
because you will get silenced by law, and they are trying to do
Yeah.
that in several countries, Britain,
Well, they're trying.
France.
I mean, Poland is they've got somewhat of a leftist government now to some degree. And I mean, even they contemplated a law to minimize, shall we say, hate speech. And hate speech is a very slippery slope. There's a question from Villainous. I just want to attend to a couple of questions. Like, why hasn't the UK government dealt with the Islamic quote unquote grooming gangs? And part of that is they need the vote. Two, I believe they are terrified of inciting some kind of civil unrest by Muslims. They're intimidated. They know that what Muslims will do, and I believe that these people are cowards. They don't feel that they can cope with that. And if the scandal actually broke in full and the facts came out, they are afraid of an uprising by their own people. And rather than deal with civil war, they would rather simply hand the country over peacefully than deal with that. That's my thought. Any comment on that before I move to the
Uh,
next question?
I am a little bit more cynic than you are,
Hmm.
because I do believe one of the things we've seen historically, at least in the last 25 years or so, when liberal government try to use fear to control their own people, not to control the danger. Where George Bush Jr. is going with after September 11 with the Patriotic Act, which is used against Americans more than it's actually used against terrorists. I believe they get to a point where not a civil war, but the prospect of it, and the government steps, guys, we will protect you, but you have to surrender some of your freedom for us.
So they're
And
using it all for benefit. I mean, there's an opportunity for them to impose some degree of totalitarian control in the face of this threat, but without dealing with the threat. But they can impose their
yes,
own.
because
Yeah,
the one thing we know from history, you cannot have a left-leaning government with a free society. It
right.
can't happen, because it must be centralized planning economically and politically and everything else. And to have a centralized planning, you must strip individual of their personal freedom. There is no
Yeah.
individual choice.
I just sense that people know there's something that's unfair, there's something that's not right, there's something immoral, and there's something then governments seem to be actively against their own native population.
Yes, it does seem that the red green alliance is real, and the left wing leaning governments across Europe and Islamists are hand in hand. The
Yeah,
problem is we've seen that historically, like in the Iranian Revolution. What happened? The first thing that an Islamist government would do is slaughter everyone on the left who supported them.
yeah, yeah. There's also a quote here from Larata Denani. I'm Spanish, and when they try to tell us
Yeah,
that Al
I,
Andalus,
I, I, I read it. It's a fantastic quote.
yes,
Um, I would like to suggest a book because this is that's kind of a myth, the Andalusian Paradise. There is a book called The Myth of Andalusian Paradise by Dario Fernandez.
yeah, I've
Uh,
covered that on this channel. Yes. Let me bring this up for that matter. I will do that quickly.
yeah, sure.
And
If you don't have the book, I can send you my digital copy anyway. But
no, I have it in my archive. The book is in my archive. For those who are interested, check my archive. Check out my YouTube streams. We're
yeah,
streaming live on Rumble, YouTube, and X. Please check my YouTube stream.
there is when it comes to actual history in European Muslim relationship, we really don't have history. We have either one-sided or propaganda. Yeah, that's the book, or we have propaganda. So if Spain wasn't taken back from the Arabs, they were not, by the way, the Muslim government in Spain wasn't the Spanish government, it was an Arab government. It was an Umayyad colonialism, imperialist government ruling over Spain. And if that government wasn't removed from power, um, France would have gone and Britain would have gone and they would have reached it to Scandinavia.
Yeah, no.
But the situation is in Spain is not what we actually hear in history. It was not that paradise at all.
No, it definitely wasn't. This book does take a hammer to those myths. So yes, so everyone,
Funny issue. Just as a side note, you know where the name Andalusia came from etymologically?
no.
The Vandals.
Oh my gosh.
So it's like I always find it humorous where you have Andalusia in Arabic. It's invoked the paradise. Actually, no, it invoked vandalism etymologically. It came from the Vandals,
Yep.
Vandals. So anyway, carry on.
Yep. So today, what I want to do is catch up on a few. I've been writing some articles on X, and I've noticed that instead of having 20 views, I'm getting up to 500, 600, 1,000. So my views are starting to grow on X. So at least there's attention being paid to what I'm saying about the Sharia. So I have 6 of these articles lined up here, and I want to touch on some of the points I've written in them, and then just discuss um, the basic contents with you to get your input because you have the depth of knowledge in some areas that I don't have. But I'm trying to simplify the point here for everyone. So to take common tropes, take common myths, take common statements that you hear, common propaganda, and try to address it with the facts. So I want to go through these, and of course we were still discussing history previously. We'll get back to that, but let me start with this, okay? So someone wrote an article that I read, and I disagreed with it to some degree. Not everything. That 90% of it I agreed with, but I believe that if the terminology we use is inaccurate, then our understanding is inaccurate. The concepts we are inaccurate, and our solutions will be inaccurate because we don't have a correct appreciation of the problem. Would you agree with that, Ibn Warraq?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct because there is something in language. I'm trying not to use postmodern terminology. I'll use my own. Indexing. When you use terminology, you are pointing out as something specific. Quite often, we would use between Arabic origin word, we would use false friends, two words
Right.
that sound the same, but they don't mean the same at all. And specifically when it comes to understanding Islam, Sharia, and theology, most of the words we use, the meaning you have in English or in any European language translated, and the meaning in Arabic is completely different. Like very, very, very few Muslim will tell you that. I remember there was hard talk discussion with Amjad Shawadri years ago, decades ago, and when they were telling him, yeah, but all the Muslim scholar says Islam forbids killing innocent people.
Sure.
Because he is a Salafi radical, and I kind of respect the guy. He
For
bite
the
the bullet.
innocent,
He said
all
we
those
don't
who are right.
consider, yeah, we don't consider non-Muslim to be innocents.
Innocent, exactly.
So, but that 20 years ago, before then, oh yeah, Islam respects innocent people. It's like, yeah, it does, but what's the definition of innocence?
Of
Uh,
innocent. So it's the same dictionary, different or same vocabulary, but a different
Different meaning,
dictionary.
different dictionary, different
Yeah.
indexing.
So, and Danish Cowboy makes a very strong point. One of the existential problems is that you've got this clash of ideology with reality that, oh, all religions are the same, which is another one of these stupid ideas, or all humans want the same things. No.
I'm yet to meet any person who actually believe that, especially in Europe. Like there isn't a single European I know of which says, "Oh, the Agori is just like the Jainist." You know anything about the Agoris?
Um, no.
Not the okay. The Agoris is a subsect of Hinduism who believe essentially there is no such thing as something bad. Everything is essentially good. And to prove their point, they practice things that you will horrify you, like cannibalism. So it's like, okay,
Very
so
self-serving, very
all religions are the
self-serving.
same. So we're okay with the Agoris then?
Of course they are. Of course they are. And you know that it's all there's no universal truth or objective truth. It's only your truth, except you're wrong and they're right.
Uh, I'm sorry, there is no universal truth. That's universally true statement,
Exactly, exactly. But you're
because
wrong and they're right.
that's a universal claim of truth.
I know. So
If
so
it
let's
is, then
it's irrational, it's not even logical. And I honestly believe that just following basic logic, the basic rules of logic and non-contradiction will solve a huge number of issues that we're dealing with today. Because logic
okay,
is a
here's a
single outcome.
problem. Yeah, here's a problem with trying to follow that, because the conclusion of the basic rule of logic and non-contradiction would lead you to a place where the person who's using it doesn't like it.
Yes, of course.
Uh,
But
it would lead you to a Christianity, it will lead you to the Bible if you're going to follow it to its logical conclusion.
yeah, no, agreed. But this
Uh,
is a heresy. I mean, this is quite honestly, it's heresy. So let me dive into the article because I've got 6 of these I want to try to get through. Let's bring up these ideas. So for those who don't understand the Sharia, let me try and give you a simple to understand overview of the impact of the Sharia, right? So this person said these are, thank God for nominal Muslims, that they aren't following Islam. But how do you know they're just nominal Muslims? How do you know they aren't following Islamic Sharia law to the letter? Because a nominal Muslim who doesn't even seem remotely Muslim is potentially following Sharia law to the letter. Because if he calls himself a Muslim, then he's beholden to the Sharia. So let's have a look. So people often say most Muslims are nominal, not really serious about their faith. But what if they are following Sharia very closely, but they are sticking to what's called the relaxed rukhsa doctrine rather than being
yeah, I might go a different way, because it's not they are nominal and it's not they follow restrict one. They are following as far as they know. The majority of
wanted?
Muslim have absolutely no clue what
Yeah,
Islam teaches.
let's talk about the doctrine because whether they
Okay,
know it or not, put
I,
it
I,
this way:
I'll,
if
I'll
you're
come. I'll come to the
let's just say
doctrine
you put a
in a second.
pause a second. So let's say you
Yes.
put a mouse. Let's say you put a mouse in a maze, or you put a mouse in a little narrow corridor. Okay, the mouse doesn't understand where it's going or what it's doing. But if that corridor only takes it to one destination, because it's essentially they've been indoctrinated as part of the culture, it's implicit rather than explicit. The outcome is the same. There's no
Okay.
difference.
I was going
So
to come to this point in a different direction. It's like
So
the one you
pause a
call.
second. Let's just look at the doctrine rather than at the people. Let's not look at the level of my neighbor is nice. Let's look at what the doctrine says.
Okay,
Because
can I say one
yeah,
thing about your neighbor is nice? If the one who doesn't know subscribe to ideology itself without knowing what it is, the second he know it's violent, that person is going to turn violent.
yeah,
He's not
yeah. I've got an
following it.
article on that. So let
He's not following it, not because he think it's not, because he doesn't know it's there.
yeah,
I did have a discussion with some
yeah.
Muslim.
I've got an article on that point. So let's get to
Yeah.
that. Let's stick
Okay.
to this rather than jump all over the place right
So
now. Let's just stick to the doctrine. So the aim
the
is to
doctor
look at
itself,
the doctrine.
you can start from the story of Ammar ibn Yasir, when he was captured in Quraysh, and they only had to let him go, wouldn't let him go until he actually badmouth and cursed Muhammad. And he did.
Yeah,
Uh, and Muhammad said to him, if they repeated, you can repeat it again, and it is prescribed
Yep.
in the Quran. So the idea of war is deceit, that's actually a hadith by
Yeah, I know,
Muhammad.
but that's off the topic. Can we just stick to the
Okay,
content
go on.
I've got here? If we can just not drift too far off the issue,
I am
because
okay. You're reading it, or you want me to read it?
no, I'm reading it, and I
Okay,
just
I'm
want to bring
listening.
these points across. I want to bring these points across because this is doctrine. I'm dealing with doctrine. I'm really very little interested in the Quran. I have almost zero interest in those things. I want to talk about what's written in the law, and then look at these simple parallels of behavior versus doctrine, and see how they actually do line up. And they're explained by the Sharia because it's inherent in the culture. Okay, so what you see as nominal Islam, right, can actually be sticking to what's called rukhsa, the relaxed version of the Sharia. Those Muslims who you think of as crazy, who are those who are highly committed jihadis, those who are what they call the radicals, those would be following, and it's compulsory for them to do so, what is called azima, strict following of the Sharia. So rather than being hypocrites or apostates, because if they were hypocrites or apostates, they may well be, as you know, unalived by their peers. But the fact that they're not means that is because of this idea of rukhsa, where you can follow the Islamic doctrine in a very relaxed, very slack, even negligent way. And as long as you have faith in your heart, Allah recognizes that, well, you're just not the very best of Muslims, but you tried. You still get reward.
It's not just that, because you have a hierarchy of command, which you would allow something that is absolutely forbidden for something higher. Like one of the example
I know
was,
that, yeah, I know that that's within. I just don't want to. I don't want to drift too far off of
okay,
this though. Yeah. Yeah, no, there's a whole. The thing is, I can confuse people with the whole complex discussion of the various doctrines, and but the point is that the article is trying to get across a simple idea, and so let's try to stick generally to the idea. I know we didn't prep on this, but is that
there's a hierarchy of doctrine, and you can ignore some, and you're allowed to do that.
yeah, correct? You can violate doctrine. In fact, you can completely violate it and still be rewarded by Allah for
That's
following
that's the
doctrine.
one I was going to bring. Like suicide is forbidden, but you can violate it being a suicide bomber, and you still get rewarded for it,
Yes, yeah.
because
So it's
there's a conflict of doctrine. You go for the higher one.
yeah, which so there's no objective standard. There's always these what would you say loopholes. There's always another way to look at it that justifies it. There's never a single. There's nothing that you can say is what it is.
Absolutely. Remember the video I sent you, and I still until today, I'm not sure if it's satire or true.
Yes, I remember watching, but yeah. So basically, knowledge. If you understand the doctrinal practice of azima versus rukhsa, this relaxed versus very strict, then this challenges the assumption that the majority of Muslims are not deeply committed. They're just as committed as they are capable of being, or
As much
because
as
they
they
are
know.
as much as they know exactly, or because someone is already being a strict, crazy jihadi Muslim, the other Muslims are not required to do that because someone else has taken on that role, and they move into secondary and tertiary roles, which I'll discuss as we go. So we mustn't use our bias. We need to understand the doctrine. So are they nominal Muslims, right? So they show up for holidays like Eid, as we discussed. But this could simply be, again, rukhsa, right? So in the Sharia, jihad is defined legally. There's only one legal definition of the Sharia, of jihad, as violent warfare to impose Islam on Christians. However, jihad also is recognized to have about 13 or 14 different types. Things like spiritual struggle or charity, zakat. Zakat compulsorily funds the jihad, even spreading Islam through words and so on. And part of that is not to interfere with the jihad. So you never see Muslims having marches against the rape gangs. You don't see that because Muslims must not get in the way of the others who are doing the jihad. Are your thoughts there?
Mhm. And you will see it from outside Europe. Uh, Other Islamic authority, when they get to groups like Boko Haram and ISIS, they said, "Oh no, we cannot call them non-Muslim because they are actually following
Yes.
the strict version of it." even though we don't.
Yes, and also, in fact, to be a Muslim, there are 3 requirements that you have to meet. 1, you must say the Shahada, right? You must believe in Allah and Muhammad as his prophet. And third, you must believe in the last day. Those are the only 3 requirements. So therefore, if a Muslim does the most heinous of things, at no point can he be called a non-Muslim if he said the Shahada, believes in Allah and Muhammad, and believes in the last day. Then he's a Muslim, period. So now these Muslims,
And faith, by the way, they
yeah,
always one extra. Yeah, they
yeah,
always have
within,
like 3 plus 1.
okay, well, and there's always the unofficial, like jihad is the unofficial 6th pillar of Islam. In fact, it's the first pillar of Islam, but it's not written down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now we focus on the violent jihad. So we see this and we think that's the only jihad. Remember, there's 13 or 14 other kinds of jihad that scholars define. So we miss the broader commitment and the fact that there's a unity within the ummah, the Muslim community, when they're doing whatever they consider jihad. All Muslims must do jihad. So basically now, have a look at zakat. Okay, so these Muslims don't actively stop the jihad. They don't get in the way of the jihad, and they support it indirectly. So zakat is the mandatory charity in Islam. You'll find it in Quran 960, and this must fund jihad efforts. So look at Reliance H817, and this permits zakat to support those fighting for Allah. Somehow jihad is always having more salads or helping little old ladies cross the street. But when you look at the legal definition, it's always about fighting and killing. And it supports soldiers and can be used to provide weapons, so funding, intelligence for the fight. So zakat funds warfare against you. Ibn al-Warraq, any thoughts?
No, carry on.
So now on social media, you'll find that Muslims will deny the jihad, right? Which could align with taqiyya. Now, as we know, there are many different kinds of deceit and dishonesty in Islam. Taqiyya is just one of them, which has 2 definitions. However, this is a form of the legal permission to lie for Islam's protection. You'll see it defined in the Reliance of the Traveler, section R8.2. Now,
And
if
you will
Muslims,
see it in hadith where Muhammad himself lied, and he considered it to be permissible because it's during a war. An act of lying is not only permissible; it's recommended.
right, right. So yeah, there's shocking though. So why can't you say the Shah now without mentioning Muhammad? Because Muhammad is he's part of Allah. Allah, according to the Islamic belief, oddly enough, Muhammad is a piece of Allah. He is literally a pure, not adulterated, a pure piece of Allah's spirit, Allah's flesh, Allah's body, whatever, Allah's being. Muhammad is technically a piece of Allah, so therefore Muhammad is the bodily, the earthly representation of Allah in that sense, according to the Sirah anyway. So yeah, you have to have a prophet. You can't simply deal with Allah alone. You have to go through Muhammad, who then becomes deified effectively. So now, if Muslims oppose the jihad, they risk being labeled apostates, right? And of course, what happens in the Sharia, as I've covered, the ruling in the Sharia for apostasy is death. There is no argument. So their silence isn't denial, right? And it isn't hypocrisy. It's compliance with a doctrine that prioritizes unity over dissent. So they're silent. They don't say anything. They're irrelevant to the cause of peace because they are not getting in the way of the bad guys. And if they do, then they will suffer punishment, up to and including being made unalive. Any thoughts, Ibn al-Warraq?
I would take it if they do exist, by the way, some minority of Muslim who are nominal, because for the lack of knowledge. Because I'm here, I'm not gonna be the cynical one who says every single one of them actually believe that and secretly work. The majority of them actually have no clue. My problem with the one who don't follow is because you can commit, some Muslims do, you commit to the ideology without knowing its details.
Mm-hmm.
So, and once you know the details, you either go all in or completely leave. And
Yep.
a lot, especially converts, European converts, once they know the details, they go all in. So it's some of the European converts are not violent because they actually don't know that the violent is permissible. Once they know it is, then I have no choice, because they will be faced with verses of the Quran that a believer have no choice of their own
Right.
own choice. If Allah said something and His Prophet said something, you have no choice but to follow. So the ones who don't know are equally as dangerous as the one who do know and act with permission.
Well, think of it as a sleeper cell or as a landmine. You just don't know when you're going to step on it, and it's going to
Yes,
explode.
yes,
Yeah. Question from Dino Dennis: does Islam mean surrender or submission in Arabic?
a submission.
Submission. Thank you. Yeah.
It will have, okay, because the people who codified the Arabic language were not Arabs, so sometimes you have a shade of meaning in different Arabic dialect and peninsula, Hijazi, Najdi, Nabati. So, but it's the technical use of the term is submission.
Okay. Right. So now, are Muslims being truthful when they claim ignorance of jihad? Now, if taqiyya permits deception, and I'm using taqiyya here as a global term for Islamic deceit, there are multiple kinds of deceit. The major umbrella is hiyal, not taqiyya, but I'm using taqiyya because it's a common phrase that people know. So basically, they might hide their support, which means you cannot necessarily trust their public stance because it's legal to lie. In fact, it's
Yeah,
oblivious.
I was gonna say I cannot give a blanket judgment for all, but
Yes.
the ones who start telling you, oh, but jihad means a spiritual struggle, those ones actually know what it means, and that's just a red herring.
Yeah.
There are some who wouldn't have a clue because it's an Arabic word that they don't speak Arabic, but the ones who try to explain it away, they know exactly what it
What it
means.
means. Yeah. So now, can we call them all jihadis? I mean, yes and no, because
I
there's a
don't
di-
personally, I
pause a
don't
second,
use
let
the
me finish
term.
the sentence.
Yeah,
So this ignores the diversity inside of the Sharia, because some might focus on non-violent jihads like education,
yeah.
right?
Uh,
Political infiltration, or providing of charity, or
and you have
providing
seen it
cover on
coming
social
out.
media.
You've seen it coming out of video from Islamist Muslims in America and Europe, where they said we need to take over education, we need to,
Yep.
politics, we need to have. So that also exists from within.
Yes. These are
Uh,
different kinds of jihad that
yeah,
also fulfill the Muslims' faith. So they're
yes,
not blowing up buses, but they're still doing jihad.
because the ultimate goal is, as we just said, is submission. So there are several Muslims in Europe and in America which says, oh yeah, but when we are the majority we will vote Sharia in and you have nothing to do but submit. So it
Yep,
doesn't have to be by weapon. They can use your own system
they will. Yep,
to vote themselves in. We're very happy, like an example, when it happened in America and they voted an entire city council as Muslim. The first decision they make, they ban non-Muslim symbols in the council. So, but they are voted in democratically. So the
yes,
use of their system against you is part of jihad,
right.
because that was done in Mecca.
Correct. So they're following. So here's the thing: whether they know it or not, they're following a culture. They're following a template that's inherent, that's bred and born into them. It's something they live. It's like a fish doesn't necessarily know it's in the water, but that's what it is. So think about it. When you grow up as a Christian in a Western society, you don't do certain things because it's not part of your culture. You don't eat with your fingers, okay, because you have a knife and fork and you just absorb that that's normal, so you just do it. So a lot of Muslims aren't necessarily trained specifically into the details, but it's part of the culture, it's part of the way of thinking and doing and
It's
acting.
it's it's the thing you said that's became second nature to
Nature.
people.
Yeah,
Nobody walks, go right, left, right, left, right, left. You just walk.
yeah, exactly,
So
because you
so
see it.
there are certain things you do it automatically.
Exactly, and this is what's happening. So can we see Muslims are nominal because they're peaceful like us? No, we cannot.
Okay, that's
So
my reason why I never talk about Muslim. I talk about Islam as ideology. So however you're close to
yeah,
it,
but a
because
Muslim, but if you call yourself a Muslim, you are then by default you adhere to the ideology.
oh yeah, or you're not a Muslim.
Exactly.
There is no
I mean,
such thing with within
if you call
Islam. There
yourself
is no such thing as nominal. You're either in
or you're
or
out.
you're out. or you're
Either
either in or
pregnant or
dead.
not. So if you call yourself a, I don't know, you call yourself a Mormon, okay, but you believe that God is a flying spaghetti monster, that and that Mary was an angel from the planet Blagabatri, and and Jesus had one wooden leg or something, which is not even remotely in the Mormon scriptures, then why are you calling yourself a Mormon if you believe something that's completely not in the scriptures, not in the doctrine, not part of the
So
belief there?
yeah, it's either hypocritical, or it's used as a counter identity, as, oh no, I'm not European, I'm a Muslim. But in this sense, it's make no sense, because being a Muslim is not counter to being European, because you can have European Muslim. So the term they use sometimes, secular Muslim, is actually a contradiction in term.
Terms. Yeah, you're a
Yeah,
Muslim, you follow the Sharia. You're not a Muslim, you don't. Simple. So if you
and
call
and
yourself a
if
Muslim, then
and if you don't like it, your fight is not with me. You go and fight with the guy who wrote it.
yeah, and if you call yourself a Muslim, then these rules apply to you. Finished. Live with it. So, for instance, Western media highlights jihad. Okay, but Western media does not discuss how these 14 approximate other jihads include peaceful efforts towards the very same aim as the violent guy. So this is wishful thinking. So now, can you label them all potential jihadis? Well, not all of them are necessarily going to be that way. Some will see the truth and they'll walk away, but the problem is that sufficient numbers of them support the caliphate, because the whole point is they are agitating to create a caliphate, a Muslim
And you
caliphate.
don't know actually with the one you are quote unquote called nominal, if and when the flip's going to switch. Remember the US
Yep,
Marine who went on in a shooting spree of his platoon a few years back.
I
So
did that.
this
Yeah,
guy, we thought that he's amazing, he's great, he's even served as a Marine, and then the switch flipped at some point. So
yep,
I don't take the point as there is a nominal and non-nominal. It's either you're in or you're out.
yeah. So this Rukhsat doctrine allows flexibility, and they might escalate to violence at any moment. You just don't know when. And zakat is funding jihad. Zakat is funding the training of future jihadis. Those 5-year-olds are being indoctrinated. So at some point, these non-violent forms of jihad are moving people towards this aggressive, potentially violent forms of jihad. But either way, they are moving everything in a particular direction that somehow funds, supports, or elevates this whole aim of the jihad. So they
one
fund the
of
spread of
one of
Islamic
the
schools.
very one of
Yeah,
the non-violent way of spreading that across Europe in the last 10-15 years, when you had a drove of immigrants coming to Europe. Saudi proposed to open 200 Islamic center in Europe. So that's taken by European as something nice and peaceful. No, those Islamic center will be going to be indoctrinating people into
yes.
what's to come.
Yep. So some of these Muslims, they're following strictly, right? Others are following in a relaxed fashion. In fact, they might even be violating everything that you think to be true Islam, right? Which may well be the case. But both are operating within Islam's bounds. Both are operating within the bounds of doctrine. Both are following the Sharia. Even if the one is drinking whiskey on Friday nights, he's still following the Sharia. Quite literally, he could well still be a very good Muslim. He's not as he's not as strict as the other Muslim. He's not earning as much reward as the other Muslim, but Allah still rewards him for drinking whiskey with you and making you feel that everything's okay so that you look the other way. So you can, that's just part of the way that Islamic doctrine works.
It's taking the end justifies the mean to its full extreme.
Yes. Yes, good point. In fact, that is one of the laws of the Sharia. There are 6 pillars of the Sharia, and the ends justify the means is literally one of them. So So, in other words, this is so a Muslim who is doing that, as we just discussed, this actually might reflect obedience. It is not laziness, it is not ignorance, it is actually obedience. He's a good Muslim, right? So we shouldn't leap to conclusions, but you must understand that what your eye sees is not necessarily what you should, what you see on the surface is not necessarily what you should assume. So the idea that most Muslims are
Or
nominal.
you can simply, logically speaking,
Hmm?
okay, so you're calling yourself non fanatic, non. That's exactly what Sharia is, and if you're not, you're out. So the choice
Yeah,
is actually yours. You're in or out,
a good
because
point.
there is no such thing as uh, no, I don't follow that. Specifically when there isn't a single Islamic, at least Sunni center, which says those doctrine, ISIS, Boko Haram, Daesh, and all the rest are wrong. They call it radical maybe, but they never call it wrong. Because Islam is capable of excommunicating people. They did that with the
Yes.
Ahmadi, they did it with the Druze and with Baha'i. But when you have the one you call media called jihadis today haven't been excommunicated, then they are one of yours, and
No, they
whatever
can't.
they're teaching
Because
is
they
yours.
correct Muslims because they've said the Shahada, they believe in Allah, Muhammad, and the last day. Period. They're still Muslims, no matter what they do. And in Islamic doctrine, a bad Muslim is better than a good Christian.
Oh yeah.
So, so final point on this article. So whether these people are paying zakat or blowing up buses or just through silence, this fits doctrine. It is not hypocrisy. You can't say that this is not a Muslim. He's a Muslim, it's just following doctrine, and the doctrine allows for them to do almost anything and still qualify for rewards from Allah. Keep that in mind. Okay, let me close that article. Now, the one I published yesterday, I think. So, yeah, you recognize this doctor over here on the left. Okay,
That's Zakir Naik, I believe.
that is Dr. Zakir Naik, yes.
Yeah, Zakir Naik, yes.
And he
He-
wrote this cool
He's
book. It says
quite funny, by the way. He's really funny.
yeah, he's hysterical. He's also an embezzler. But jihad to the USA, immigration and customs. Isn't that interesting? Jihad to USA, immigration. Isn't that odd? So Muslims, the you're on CNN, you're on Fox News, you're everywhere. It's like these Muslims are going to integrate. No, if they're a Muslim, they will never integrate because the term Muslim says something completely the opposite of integration. It means the spread of Islam, the dominance of Islam, and immigration is a form of jihad. This is a short article.
Okay,
So
very, very, very quick question. It's still in the line. How did the Medina become Muslim?
immigration, it was the first jihad.
And once they immigrated and became in having some power, what happened to the population that was there, specifically the Jews of Medina? They were expelled or
Yep,
exterminated. So
yep.
immigration is from the very beginning is a form of jihad in Islam.
Yeah, Emmanuel, I'm not
You know,
sure
the
I made a video.
Muhajirun, the
Sorry.
Muhajirun translation of the name is the immigrants.
Yeah, well, people have to really, hopefully we can make a difference with this information. So no, I didn't make a video, I believe, Emmanuel, but I've spoken about it. I've because you'll find elements of the Sharia within socialist doctrine. Oddly enough, you do find parallels. Okay, so Muslim immigration is not what it seems, right? Again, reliance on the traveler. This is your first go-to resource for understanding the Sharia. Ignore the Quran, just forget about that book for now, right? So if you immigrate, it is only valid.
Sorry, can I explain why the sentence you said ignore the Quran? Because somebody might find it strange. The Quran is, even in Arabic, is not very clear, and books like Umdat Salik, The Rounds of the Travelers, and others would spell out what it actually means and how they implement the text of the Quran. Because if you're going to take the text as ambiguous as it is, and how that is put in practice, so you depend on books like that. He's not saying the Quran is not authoritative. He said the Quran is meaningless unless they tell you what it means.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot to be said there, but and Noam saying welcome. Come please check out Candid with Lubna. Ask her to invite me. I mean, I've reached out to many people, and very few of them actually reply to me or invite me on. Or so for every 10 people I reach out to, one or two will respond. One of the responses will be, I'm really busy right now. If you could send me an email in 2028, preferably somewhere in the second half of the year, that would be great. And the other one might invite me on. The other eight will just be silent and never answer me. So yeah, if Lubna is willing to discuss with me, I'd be happy to do so. Okay, so Reliance the Traveler tells us that only migrating to serve Allah's purpose earns reward. If you migrate for the purpose of worldly gain, right, then you get nothing from Allah. Allah will ignore you. In fact, at the end of the day, at the gates of paradise, Allah will say, huh, what? You wanted money, you got a
You
job?
have those who emigrate for other reason or remain in a country that's non-Muslims for other reason than jihad. Will the Quran call them? They have wronged themselves and they're going to go to hell. So
Yep.
your immigration is either for the purpose of spreading Islam or you don't do it.
All right. Yep. So, for instance, we learn from Islamic doctrine. Now, some of this I've paraphrased. The original article, the original is quoted here on the bottom. You can see that. It's here, but sometimes I will use common phrasings which are found on the internet, which Muslims use, simply to simplify the language, because sometimes it can be very 14th century Shakespeare. So whoever emigrates to a land for the sake of worldly gain, such as money or marriage or job, gets only what he aimed for, right? You can see this in Reliance, Book O, 11, meaning there's no divine reward. But whoever emigrates for Allah and His Messenger, his reward is with Allah. Allah will reward him. So pointing to a paradise, right? Pointing to paradise for those who migrate to spread Islam, who migrate in the way of Allah. And to do anything in the way of Allah, anything in the way of Allah is jihad fi sabilillah, jihad in the way of Allah. So if you're doing something in the way of Allah, that is jihad. So Islamic doctrine ties immigration to jihad, explicitly stated by a guy called Fethullah Gulen. This is a Turkish Islamic, shall we say,
Fathallah Gulen is one of the most dangerous Islamists in America. The guy actually run over 1,000 charter schools in
schools.
America, and his aim goal is to infiltrate himself within the society and basically make sleeper cells to be activated at a certain point.
So he's
And
doing education jihad.
he's the only one actually personally scares me,
Yeah, this guy,
because
he's got armed guard in his
he was
house.
in Bill Clinton Foundation. He has a connection to a lot of politicians, and the guy seems harmless, but he recruits Islamist teachers and run about 1,000. Last time I checked, 10 years ago or so,
Yeah,
1,000 charter schools in America, and the people he teach, those are this is recruitment centers, not education centers.
of course. This is education jihad. We just spoke about it in the previous article. So
Yeah.
this is him doing his bit. He's creating the future jihadis. He's creating the political infiltrators. He's creating the people whose minds are indoctrinated to spread the caliphate silently.
And they will be the White House advisors and the national security advisors and so on and so on. So you're basically going to hand them power willingly.
Yep. So basically, now, according to Fethullah Gulen, immigration is the twin of jihad. So this serves to extend Islamic ideology into non-Muslim regions, not to blend in, not to integrate. So we have all these naive or ignorant assumptions of integration. But when Muslims immigrate for religious motives, as the Sharia endorses, then only do they receive reward as a good Muslim. Only then will Allah reward them and the community respect them, because they are there to impose the Sharia. And if they want to adopt local values, well, then it's like black people get told when they try to get a good education.
And I don't know why we don't believe Muslim, because they actually is this is not hidden, because you can see it. Take you 2 seconds googling it.
Yep.
When you ask immigrants, Muslim in Europe, in America, oh, we are here to take over. They are
Yeah.
not hiding that. It's like, no, we're not here to assimilate and integrate. By the way, even the ones who are born in Europe, I've met several people who are born in Europe, and they said, oh, I'm a Muslim from Somalia, but you're born here. I said, oh, I would never be loyal to this country, which he was born at. So
Yeah.
it's it's a completely different loyalty, priority.
Yeah. No, we just need to understand. And the thing is that these behaviors that we see, when you read the Sharia, you see exactly a one-to-one correlation. Here's the law in the Sharia, there's the behavior you see on CNN. Here's the law in the Sharia, there's the movie clip you see on X. It's as simple as that. Everything these people do, you go to the Sharia, there it is, explained in
And
detail.
and in the case of the extreme minority who actually don't and trying to assimilate, they will be shamed into submission.
And
because
silence.
you know you're a Muslim and you have to help the ummah and all the rest. Otherwise, it might be detrimental to your own life.
Correct. So let's end this one. It's a very short one. I'm going to just read this last section here, and he's quote from his book, where he explains this. The Messenger of Allah, Muhammad, an analysis of the Prophet's life, by M. Fatullah Gulen. He says, Bukhari, Muslim, and Abu Dawood relate from Umar that Allah's Messenger said, actions are judged according to intentions. This is very important. It's called niyat, right? One is
In,
rewarded for
that's
whatever
actually
one.
the first hadith in Bukhari, the first one. إنما
Right.
الأعمال بالنيات وإنما لكل امرئ ما نوى فمن كانت هجرته إلى الله ورسوله. Whoever migrated for Allah and His Messenger. So that's literally the first hadith in Bukhari. Sorry, I read it in Arabic. I didn't memorize
No,
it
that's
in English.
fantastic. No, that's great. So he says actions are judged according to their intentions. One is rewarded for whatever one intends to do. So in other words, what you do in your heart, never mind what you are seen to do outside. That's the intention up here. So a Muslim can be, as we said, drinking alcohol, but if inside his head he's doing it for a good cause, at the end of the day, then Allah judges the intention, not the action. So whoever
Again,
immigrates,
that's Machiavelli on a steroid.
yeah, that's deceit, that's dishonesty on it. So whoever immigrates for Allah and His Messenger has immigrated for Allah and His Messenger. Whoever immigrates to acquire something worldly or to marry has immigrated for what is intended. So he'll get his marriage, he'll get his money, he'll get his job, and he'll go to hell, right? Intention is the spirit of our actions. For example, if we fulfill our religious duties without making an intention to do so, these are unacceptable to Allah. You have to intend to do jihad. You have to intend to blow up a bus. You must intend to go stab 3 little girls at a Southport dance
And
club.
the same thing goes for prayer and fasting. Prayer without intention is invalid. Fasting without intention is invalid.
Yes,
So it's the intention behind it as well. Yeah.
yes. And so if we do not seek Allah's good pleasure, what we do is not rewarded by Allah. Hijrah, sacred emigration in the way of Allah, anything in the way of Allah is jihad, can be considered a twin of jihad, which is holy struggle in the way of Allah. And I've got here finally a quote from the Shariah from Reliance of the Traveler. Works,
That's from Bukhari and Muslim. That's a
yes,
hadith which is the most authentic form of hadith they have in Sunni
and Abu
Islam.
Dawood as well. So
It,
works are only according to intentions, and a man only receives what he intends. So whoever's emigration was for worldly gain or to wed a woman, his is for that to which he emigrated. So Allah won't care. You got what you wanted. Well, don't come to me. My name's Allah. You should have done it for me, not for you. So this is a hadith whose authenticity Bukhari and Muslim agree upon. And there is complete scholarly consensus, the ijma, on the greatness of its rank and majesty. It is one of the cornerstones, fundamental supports, and most important integrals of the Islamic faith. And he said it constitutes 1/3 of Islamic sacred knowledge. 1/3 of the Sharia is emigration in the way of Allah. I'll stop there.
two things. One funny thing is the word sacred doesn't exist in Arabic here. Because non-religious, non-sacred knowledge isn't considered knowledge in Islam. It's literally says it's 1/3 of knowledge. So any knowledge outside the Quran and Hadith isn't considered knowledge to start with.
Yeah, yeah,
So
true.
there is no sacred secular knowledge dichotomy. There is
Yeah,
knowledge and any other. The other point is it's not only immigration is used for jihad, there's migration as well.
yeah,
Like if Muslim living in a non-Muslim country, leaving that country, going somewhere else is considered also part of jihad. Because if you no longer live in a certain country, you're no longer taxpayers, you don't pay taxes and so on. So you're not helping the non-Muslim to prosper. But you go and spend your money in an Islamic country, support that country's army. And so migration and immigration are both considered part of jihad.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, just moving from one place to another, that's, yeah. Okay, so hold on. Yeah, okay, so yeah, someone's asking, will I do a deep dive on the Talmud? I did like 14 hours on the Talmud with Jan Irvin, as someone mentioned there. And the
Yeah,
two
I
are,
wouldn't. I haven't read it.
yeah, just pause
And
a second, that's fine. I spent months reading the Talmud. It is nothing like the Sharia. I know everyone's gonna lie to you and tell you all sorts of fancy things
no,
about the Talmud.
a friend of mine has it. I went and browsed it, but because uh, the conceptually it's a record of debates, it doesn't have
Yeah,
that kind of authority.
yeah, no, I was actually speaking to the audience, no, not to you in this case
Oh, sorry.
specifically. No, I've read the Talmud. I did 14 hours of work on the Talmud. You can check, look for me and Jan Irvin. Look for my name with Jan Irvin. And we did Judaism. We did the Talmud. The two are nothing alike. Even though people are going to say, "Well, the Talmud says," which is 99% of that is complete lies, misrepresentation, falsehoods.
Oh
The
yeah,
Sharia is explicit,
I
however.
wrote something. Someone was posting. I didn't, as I said, I didn't read it. Uh, certain on X, certain quotation allegedly supposed from the Talmud, and someone says all those quotations are fake and manufactured, and they're not there. My reply was, but funny enough, those quotation I can prove them from the Quran.
Yeah, and you can prove them from the
It
Sharia. They're
is that.
explicit in the Muslim sources. It's explicit in Muslim sources, and then, oh, it's okay, it's Muslims, it's not real. Let me do this one. Let me do this one. Nice neighbors and problematic doctrines. But Sabina at the bomb factory was such a nice, hardworking Nazi. She was a nice person, therefore, Nazism must be an okay belief system because Sabina is so nice. So, this is called Nice Neighbors and Problematic Doctrines. Actually, let me drop this in the chat just so you guys have this, so that I will so you guys can go to the link. Please give it a read and share it around. I'd appreciate if you'd share it with people. So my Muslim neighbor is a nice person who's often used to counter claims about the violent or hostile nature of Islamic doctrine. Now, this is well intentioned. People are trying to say nice things about people, but this is flawed. It is seriously a flawed argument. It's a bad argument. It's logically wrong. And it's irrelevant to the discussion of what Islam teaches at a doctrinal level, right? It's like saying Hans, who worked in a Nazi bomb factory, was a peaceful man and a wonderful gentleman. Sure, he was. Sure, Hans was nice.
Or I can take it a different way, like the Spanish Inquisition was absolutely vile. But I cannot say, oh, look at Christianity because the Spanish Inquisition. You judge the people by the founding document. You don't judge the founding document by the people. So
Yep.
your neighbor
Well,
might be your neighbor is nice person in spite of Islam, not because of it.
yeah, and also he might be simply following rukhsa. You see, he might
Y-
be deceiving you. So there's also that sad possibility. By the way, just as an aside, I've actually been meaning to for the last 2 years. I've been trying to find time to do a talk on the Spanish Inquisition. 95% of which people know about it is completely false. Okay, because most of it is quite bluntly Protestant lies, and I mean that literally. So, but I'll move on from that point because I will get to that. I've got a ton of material on it. I need to get to some point in my life. So, okay, individual behavior does not define or negate the written doctrine, especially when the doctrine is demonstrably evil or violent, as we can find in the Sharia, right? So,
And specifically in Islam, because anybody comes with a new doctrine that's not found in the text is a
yep,
heretic. So you're not allowed to come up with something new interpretation. That's not an option.
yeah, yeah, fair enough. So, for instance, Islamic doctrine is found in its foundational text. You have the Quran, the Hadith, and the Sharia, and don't forget the Sirah. Typically, people forget the Sirah, right? So, Quran 9:29, fight those who do not believe in Allah until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. So, the text literally mandates violence against non-Muslims. But then you also have a doctrine.
Not all non-Muslim, though. Sorry, I need to explain this. This text is violent against Jews, Christian, and the Russian only. But because those they have the option to pay jizya and remain Christians. Anybody who belongs to any other religion doesn't have the option of jizya. It's either convert or die.
Yeah. So now you've got the doctrine of what's called al-wala wal-bara, right? Loyalty and disavowal, enmity and hatred and disavowal, right? So this requires hatred towards disbelievers. Now you look at Quran 551, do not take the Jews and Christians as friends and allies. Now these teachings differ from Muslims go back 3,500 years to the laws of Moses and go, look what is written. Yeah, look, man, we're not stoning people today anywhere in the world except in Muslim countries. Only Muslims do that today, right? So now these teachings in the Quran and in these sources are prescriptive. Even if they're not doing it right now, they are meant to. Whereas the Bible is largely descriptive. It's a history of behaviors, a history of actions, and mostly it's a history of immoral actions and things that were wrong. And they dictate behavior regardless of how the individuals act. So saying that Hamad is a nice person assumes that his behavior reflects the doctrine. But Hamad's nice behavior does not reflect the doctrine at all. Hamad is being nice because he's trying to deceive you, very potentially, or he's ignorant, or he's not a Muslim. So this could be personal character, cultural norms, or just selective adherence to Islam. But it does not erase what the Muslim texts command. Any comment before I move on?
There is one addition to the hadith he used and the verse he used. There is another verse in the Quran. It's Surah 60, verse 4, where it says, you have a good example in Abraham and those who followed him when they said unto their people, including his father,
We acquit of
uh,
you and everything that, yeah.
yeah, and there is only hatred between us and you, and we despise you. So the good example was left in Abraham. He hate his people.
Yeah, no, I've covered that before. In fact, I have an article on it, but yeah, the thing is that with these articles that I'm writing, I spend some time. I've got 3 that I'm still editing, and I'm trying to keep it simple without being overwhelming, keep it short and understandable to the layperson.
I am a nerd. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So because I mean, man, I could write a 15-page article or a 500-page book on the topic, but the thing is that I'm trying to make it something people can understand and use rather than overwhelm them with facts. So now the doctrine is unchanged by Hamad's niceness, right? And a law isn't nullified because someone doesn't follow it. So now let me have a look here. I'll skip this. Now, Hamad's kindness doesn't alter what Quran 9:5 says. Kill the polytheists wherever you find them. Now, Shariah, you can find it in Reliance of the Traveler, 09.0, mandates jihad. This is prescribed. So doctrine is what drives action, right? You've got Taliban executions, you've got the Islamic conquests, you've got Boko Haram. I mean, you've got Christians are being murdered, beheaded en masse. 40, 50, 70 Christians at a time are beheaded or burned to death, shot to death, and then burned inside of. It's insanity
And
what's
you
happening in
also
Nigeria.
have in your drive the book by Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, explaining the hadith. I was sent by the sword between before the final hour. So the guy literally says, "I came to chop your head off."
Yep.
And
Yep.
it's the according to Muhammad, the word he used, Sinam, jihad is the pinnacle of Islam.
Yeah.
And because they have hierarchy, anything less than the pinnacle can be disobeyed, gone against, as long as you keep the pinnacle.
Yeah. Yeah. So we often say, look, this guy's misinterpreting, or Muslims are trying to tell us, they gaslight us by saying that Muslim's misinterpreting Islam. No, no, no. He's following it faithfully. So now, likewise, Nazi doctrine, not Hans's gentleness, drove the Third Reich's atrocities, right? The SS units that killed millions of people, I mean, what, 15, 20 million plus people died during World War II. They acted on Nazi ideology, on the teachings, on the written doctrine, not on Hans's nice personal feelings. So the doctrine is what shapes the systems, it shapes the actions, and individuals can deviate, but that doesn't rewrite the doctrine. That
And
doesn't
we
rewrite
we
ideology.
did historically recognize the individual who did deviate in Judaism. They called them righteous among the nation. The Hans who actually didn't act according to the ideology because they recognized it as evil and they couldn't go along with it. We didn't consider them to be part of that ideology. So your
Mhm.
nice neighbor might just not be a Muslim, but at least for social reason he can't speak out. because we know in Muslim majority country there's a lot of people who are not Muslim in the slightest, but they keep the mouth shut because
Yes.
it's their life on the line.
So yeah, so Hans was a peaceful Nazi, doesn't absolve Nazism, and Hamad is a nice person, doesn't absolve Sharia, doesn't absolve Islam. Both doctrines, Islam calls for jihad and the hatred of the non-Muslim kafir, and Nazis, well, they have race hatred, which, just so that you know, is very well derived from a guy called Darwin, Charles Darwin. If you want to understand why World War One happened, please look at my series on World War One and Charles Darwin. And if you want to know why World
It's
War Two
it's
happened,
when it's when Darwin met Hegel.
well,
Uh,
Darwin was always like man. I did a series. I've got an 8-part series on Darwin, Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin was
oh yeah,
much,
and I'm not disagreeing. I'm saying, but if you take the social Darwinism, put it alongside with Hegel and Nietzsche,
yeah.
you get Nazi philosophers.
Yeah, no, but what happens is for instance, in World War One, the Germans that started World War One were explicitly quoting Darwin, Darwinian ideology, Darwinian struggle, Darwinian jihad. Sorry, my bad. Darwinian jihad for survival was what was the doctrine driving these Germans to kill everyone else because they need to kill off the bad species. You know those blacks that aren't so. You know what I mean? Like
I'm not going to comment on this because it will take me to a completely different
yeah.
direction.
Let's not go there. But
Yeah.
I just want to mention that. No, like this is just for the audience. That's not. It's for the audience. So understand that Darwin is very much at fault here. That Darwin that everyone loves so much. Once you understand Darwin and read what Darwin wrote, Darwin was murderous, genocidal, and completely batshit insane. The man was a
Eh,
psychopath.
and
And
except yeah, and he
and
wasn't.
also,
He's not.
one last point before
Yeah.
we go on. One last point. When you read Darwin's work, when you actually read Darwin's work on evolution, you will find that it is almost verbatim quoting thousand-year-old Sufi beliefs. It is actually,
Which is quoting Anaximander 700 BC. He didn't come with anything new. He put a
yeah,
scientific
it's
veneer in
Sufi
it.
beliefs, it's Muslim
Uh,
beliefs. Darwin was
yeah,
quoting Muslim beliefs, and also Darwin was a social Darwinist. His entire family was social Darwinists. That's another one of those errors that people believe that Darwin has nothing to do with Darwinian ideology. There's no such, yeah, just like atheists will tell you odd things about there is no blah blah blah. I have not
don't
jumped the
yeah
shark. I have I
don't
have a
go don't go to
16-hour
Darwin.
series.
I'm interested in the
Yeah.
subject, but it will take us over an
Yeah.
hour to just talk
No,
about.
this is seriously. I've got a 16-hour series on Darwin,
Yes, just
detailed dive
let
on Darwin's
let him
writings
go for
and life,
now.
and
I'm
Darwin,
resisting.
fucking crazy maniac. The
Yeah.
man was absolutely batshit insane and genocidal, and was responsible for World War One and World War Two by teaching his ideology to crazy people who then applied it. So
and
it's that
and
essential.
he's responsible Karl Marx as well
Yep, he heavily
because
influenced Karl Marx. Karl Marx
I,
loved
I
him.
I'm trying to avoid it. Please just move on because I am interested in the subject, but it
Yep.
will really take us quite far away.
No, I did. I've got like something like 16 hours on Darwin, like going through Darwin's life and quotes and what Darwin wrote and believed. And the man is just insane. So moving on. So just
Moving on.
yeah, moving on. Okay, so I want to let me do this one. So in the interest of time, let's try and do two more. Let me think. Which one should I do? Islam teaches hatred of non-Muslims, or Allah and Yahweh have fundamentally opposed natures.
Or the one before that, which is going to be quite quick. That's the one.
Okay, let's do this one. It's actually longer than the first one. Okay, so Islam falsely claims that they revere Jesus. They will gaslight you whole day. We actually revere Jesus because Jesus is a lesser prophet than Muhammad. In fact, Jesus is on the second heaven.
Okay.
Muhammad goes all the way up to the seventh. And when Muhammad prays, Jesus stands behind him submissively and prays. But we love Jesus. And in fact, we don't even know who Jesus is. We know a guy called Isa. It's like I love President President Benkins. I love President Benkins. President Benkins is president of the USA, and we love President Benkins. In fact, President Benkins is a great guy, and we really like him. But but isn't it Donald Trump? No, it's President Benkins, and he was he's a handicapped guy with with only one leg, and he's currently the president of the USA. And
Could I ask you something? Do you consider the term "my lord" to be a term of honor?
look
Telling,
in the
telling,
Western in the
and
Western
yes, yeah,
understanding,
and for
the
telling
word lord
someone
is
royal family, my lord, or your excellency, as a term of
the word
honor.
lord is a red letter word in the Bible, so obviously it has a
No,
specific
I'm
meaning.
not talking the biblical. I'm talking about European royalty. When you say
Yeah, it
someone,
would be. It means some level of
okay,
status. Yeah.
but if you call a king my lord, that's an insult, isn't it? His proper title is Your Majesty.
Yeah, my lord would be a lesser royal. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, so that would be an insult to a king to call him my lord. So when Muslim says we revere Jesus as one of the most five honorable prophets, okay, sorry, according to Christian doctrine, whether you agree with it or not, that's not the point. According to Christian, he is the creator of Muhammad. So when you make the creator of Muhammad lesser than, it doesn't
Mhm.
matter, you have insulted him infinitely, because the difference
Yes.
between a creator and a creature. So whoever the Isa, indexing again, whoever the Jesus is described in Islam has absolutely nothing to do with the Jesus of the Christian doctrine.
Yep.
And that's one. Two, whoever the Jesus of Islam is actually kind of have nothing to do with the Jesus of the Bible at all,
Yep. It's a Gnostic
because
Jesus. It's literally a Gnostic Jesus found in fourth century Gnostic Gospels.
yeah, it actually gets a little bit worse. There's three verses in the Quran. Uh, very quickly, there is one verse says, "We وما أنزلنا وما أرسلنا من رسول إلا بلسان قومه." We have never sent a messenger except by the language of his own people. Okay,
Hmm.
and then the second verse says about Jesus, he's a messenger to the children of Israel. Okay, so they sent every messenger, put your thinking cap on. They sent every messenger with the language of his own people, and he's a messenger to the children of Israel. And the third verse says, and we have given him the gospel, Injil.
Hmm.
Here's the funny thing, Injil is not an Aramaic or a Hebrew
It's a
word,
Greek word,
it's a Greek
technically. Yeah.
word.
In fact, it's
So
possibly even Ethiopian.
but we know if the word Greek meaning, if it's in Aramaic, it will be Basharoth. So we
Yeah.
know so you're sending a messenger to people who speak Aramaic with the Greek book. Those three verses can impossibly be reconciled.
Yeah.
So he's either sent to the Greek, then a messenger to the children of Israel is wrong, or he was sent with a Greek book, then we send the prophet with the language of his own people is wrong. So that the character himself is self-contradictory, incoherent nonsense. One. Two, in within Quran, you know the idea that Jesus talked as a baby in the Quran.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, why?
Because that's part of the Gnostic Gospels. That's in the infancy
I
gospel
know,
of
but that's
Jesus.
not the Gnostic, but Islamic explanation.
Hmm.
Because according to Islam, as a baby, he cannot be a prophet. He didn't reach the age of majority yet. So babies and children cannot be prophets. He is not accountable to anything. So a miracle here doesn't prove anything. A miracle to prove the innocence of
Fantastic.
Mary is irrelevant, because according to reality, actually she was
Yeah.
married. So nobody had the right to ask her whose son is that.
Okay.
So there is a miracle, and she cannot be a prophet because she's a woman. So you have a miracle here that's purposeless, unreasonable, and happened for no reason whatsoever.
Right. Yeah. Let's stick closer to the article though, without deviating too
Okay,
far. So what you've got is they demote Jesus. They make him a lesser prophet. They deny his divinity. They deny the crucifixion. They deny the resurrection, which undermines Christianity, and they usurp Jesus' role with a very deeply immoral Muhammad. So they insist that Islam elevates and respects Jesus, portraying him as a significant prophet. But it's like saying that, now remember, if I spoke about President Benkins, you wouldn't know the heck I'm talking about, right? That's not President Trump.
or calling a king my lord.
Yeah, see, because President Trump has a name, and if I keep going President Benkins, you go, who the heck is President Benkins? There's never been a President Benkins, but I insist that this is President Trump's real name. You'd go like, you're nuts. And exactly, Isa is not Jesus. This is a
And
different
because
character that created.
yeah, historically Muhammad has a large population of slaves, Roman slaves. So they were talking the Greek language, and Jesus, Yeshua, in the Greek language would be Isos. So he heard the Isos. The closest thing to Arabic in his head is Isa, which I have no idea where he got that from, other than possibly the Greek. It doesn't exist in any
Close,
other
but
language.
yeah. So basically, now let's look at Islam's portrayal of Jesus, right? They misname Jesus as Isa, right? And it says, "Oh Mary, indeed Allah gives you good tidings of a word from Him." Now let's not get into the whole philosophy of a word, okay? Whose name will be the Messiah, Jesus, the Son of Mary, distinguished in this world and the hereafter, and among those brought near. Fine and well.
Yeah,
It seems,
Messiah isn't a name.
yeah. Now it seems respectful, but Islam strips Jesus of his divinity, which is a foundational Christian belief because he is God. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now remember, you've got, even if you read the Mormon Bible, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was a God. We call that heresy and blasphemy. Islam does something very similar, not identical, but similar,
And we
and
call
we
it
are going to
we
see
call
that
it
how.
grammatical error as well. So the Mormon Bible has huge grammatical problems with
Yeah, I
it.
don't want to get too deep into that. That's not the point of the discussion. I'm just trying to illustrate a point there. So we call the one blasphemy, therefore this should also be blasphemy. So this identifies Jesus as divine in John 1:1, but Islam rejects this. Quran 575 says, the Messiah, son of Mary, was no other than a messenger. Well, Muhammad was just a warner, except Muhammad was special, right? Messengers, the like of whom had passed away before him. So they make him a human prophet. They make him subordinate to Muhammad, right? Who is called the seal of the prophets, right? I've seen seals at SeaWorld where they clap and they balance balls on their head. Apparently, that's what Muhammad is. And so Jesus is supposedly honored in Islam, but he's not the Son of God. He's not part of the Trinity. Now, again, you've got the Bible that affirms this, right? Matthew 28:19.
And
Baptize them in the name of the Father,
there is
the
actually
Son.
no Trinity in the Quran as even as an objection. There are tritheism.
Yes, I know that's a completely different story,
Yes,
but yeah, but we have to baptize in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But Quran 4:171 says, as it's interpreted, do not say three, Allah is only one God. Now that could well be a warning to the tritheists, but let's just take it as given for now, right? So again, they don't elevate Jesus, they deny his divinity, they deny the Trinity, and it's a redefinition that completely removes Jesus' status as God. It rewrites the history. Okay, so Shlomo,
one
hold a
point.
second, please wait, please.
Sure.
Shlomo, the Darwin playlist looks bizarre and titling childish. I will check out the preview, but I do not have high hopes. I don't give a shit what you think. Okay, you are on my channel. I have done very careful analysis of Darwin, going through his works. Darwin was a fucking crazy man. Okay, Darwin was a genocidal maniac. The man was batshit insane. He was promoting paganism and he was promoting Sufism. Everything that we've been told about Darwin is 99% lies. The man's philosophies are behind two world wars, which were murderous. Okay, he inspired some of the worst murderers to ever live, from the Nazis to the socialists. So yeah. Now another stupid word from you, and I'll be kind. I'll ban you for 24 hours because you're annoying me with your stupid comments. But yeah, I really don't care what you think of that. But anything more, and I'll simply just ban you because look, seriously, you can have an opinion and there's the facts. I know what the facts are because Darwin was not a good man. Darwin was a very ill man. And seriously, all this atheism nonsense, that's a large bunch of crap. People don't understand how toxic, how dangerous and lethal Darwin's ideas were. So yeah, so moving on. Sorry, that's just my annoyance speaking. But yeah, they claim that Jesus was a Muslim, right? They claim the Jews weren't real Jews. Or they'll twist anything and everything.
Okay, two things very quickly. Um, there is always the linguistic terminology and then the theological one. If you're going to take the term Muslim as linguistically, I am a Muslim, so you are a Muslim, and anybody who submits to the will of God is a Muslim. That's linguistically, and it's
So are
irrelevant. But
Buddhists.
just
So are Buddhist
but
Muslims then as well,
yes,
right?
but if you're gonna take Jesus as a Muslim with the equivocation in the same meaning, that the implication of that is quite funny, because the implication is someone can be a Muslim without believing Muhammad existed, because it was 600 years before him, without believing a word about the Quran, and without following anything about Muhammad. So how about you guys all become Muslims and ignore Muhammad, please? Be Muslims like Jesus and David and
Yeah, so I'm a
Moses.
Muslim because
And
I believe I follow my creator. That
yeah,
makes me a Muslim.
so
And
but it completely stripped the word Muslim from the recognition of Muhammad and the Quran. Which,
yep,
if that's your definition, yeah, sure, remove the Quran and we're on. Second point, and very quickly, and I'm not going to go into deep detail about it. The Quran technically actually doesn't deny the crucifixion. Technically,
yep.
it denied that the Jews did it. So the implication is a lot of Muslim scholars said, yeah, because they didn't, the Romans did.
Yeah, but
And
the thing is, if he didn't
and
die, then the Jews didn't kill him, and no one
because
killed
the
him.
text, yeah, because the text is extremely ambiguous, they actually
Mhm.
have no idea what it means.
Right.
Some Muslim scholar says, literally says, this is the best attested historical event we know. But it's one of those things where the text itself doesn't tell you what it is, but Muslims do. That's one, and again, one of the things where the Quran is ambiguous, and then Muslims make up their doctrine in Sharia books and Hadith, and they believe what they made up.
Yeah, I mean,
Move
and
on.
they're allowed to lie. So how do you know whether they're ignorant or lying or just, it's hard to tell.
A
Okay,
little
so
bit,
last
a little
point on
bit of
this,
both. Yes.
I just want to mention. So Jesus says, "Love your enemies," right? That's a Christian command. Love your enemies. Allah nowhere says to love the Christians, to love the Jews. Allah nowhere says to love your enemies. He does say to kill them, however. So look, Muhammad, for instance, right? He has a marriage to Aisha at the age of 6. He consummates at 9. Why did he wait until 9? Because Aisha fell ill and her hair fell out, and it took her 2.5, almost 3 years to recover. So he had legal conjugation, whatever relations, conjugal relations with his bride at 9, because he would have done it at 6, but she got sick first and she had to get well first. So yeah, it's not because he was compassionate, it's because she was sick. That's why he waited an extra 3 years. Then, of course, he says, Allah's messenger said, "Who is willing to kill this guy for me?" Jesus ordered no
Ka'b
murder.
ibn al-Ashraf.
Yep. Okay, so hold on. Shlomo, I don't give a shit. Good night. Goodbye. Have a nice life. So, anyhow, moving on. Now, he also says in the Quran, right? Kill the polytheists. Allah says, kill the polytheists wherever you find them, right? Jesus says, my kingdom is not of this world. Muslims have to establish a caliphate, which is a political domain, right? And the apostles, none of them were murderers, rapists, and conquerors who went around subjugating people, whereas Muslims, all of their companions of Muhammad, they were exactly those things. These are completely different categories of people. They're completely unrelated. So this is
And
not,
they didn't only went on killing non-Muslim, they went on, just as he died, killing each other.
yeah, they attacked. I mean, yeah, how many of Muslims of the Muslim Rashidun caliphs were murdered by others?
Uthman, Omar, and Ali.
Ali, yeah, murdered. I mean, you didn't see the apostles of Jesus murdering each other to become number one caliph. No, but you see the Muslims doing it, and this is supposed to be the best example for mankind, right? And these are the people closest to Muhammad. So now, if Islam, now this is a strategic replacement. They undermine Christianity's foundation to establish and assert Islamic supremacy. So if Islam really respected Jesus, they would affirm his divinity and his resurrection, but they redefine him to a lesser prophet. They just steal his name. Then they twist the meaning of his name. They twist the history. They simply replace him with Muhammad. And you can see that just on a basic level already, Jesus and the apostles' morals clash completely with Muhammad's moral example. So this is a contradiction that you cannot reconcile given Christian beliefs.
Yeah, you can add to that a hadith. Muhammad said he's going to marry Mary in heaven.
Yes, yes, I've actually quoted that before, and I mean, yeah,
It's like,
that's he's gonna stoop her as well, and he's like,
you know,
okay, Jesus' mother,
what do you
great.
mean the Virgin Mary? I'm going to marry her in heaven. Okay, so
Yeah.
there is that.
So Islam's assertion of elevating Jesus is a false narrative. It denies his divinity, demotes him below Muhammad, rejects the crucifixion, the resurrection, replaces Jesus' message with violence and conquest. So you have Muhammad's action, you've got child marriage, and of course, conjugal relations with a child. Now, you know what's crazy? Here's a thought. They say, well, back then, 9-year-olds were the equivalent of 25-year-olds today. Okay? Well, obviously, biology has now changed, and 1400 years later, 9-year-olds are like 9-year-olds, no longer like 25-year-olds, because the desert air is not so hot here in Poland where it's snowing, right?
And that will be completely irrelevant for one reason, because Muhammad given in the Quran and the Hadith as the highest moral
Is the perfect
example for
example.
human who must be imitated.
So
So
if
it's that
the
his the
excuse,
imitation of him must be
yeah,
ongoing today.
so the excuse that they give, well, girls were different then, so condemn Muhammad today because he set an example that is valid today, even though the desert conditions are different now, and 9-year-olds are only 9
And
and not 25 anymore.
there are several Islamic countries that actually don't have minimum age of marriage. Iraq,
Yep,
Egypt, then Iran, for
because there is
example.
no minimum age of marriage under
And
Shariah.
there are Muslim scholar, both Sunni and Shi'i, where it says no, as young as 4. And you have a verse in the Quran, you know it very well. It's like no. So this is trying to whitewash certain things where he says, "Oh, it was bad then, so everybody did it." If everybody did it, then you are saying that Muhammad followed the tradition and the example of his pagan culture. So you cannot turn around and says he's the highest Muslim example. He's just another pagan warlord who followed the example of other pagan warlords.
Yep. So you got child marriage, you got assassinations, you got warfare, which stands in complete contradiction with Jesus' life of love and sacrifice, as well as the apostles. So we must recognize that Muslims are trying to usurp Jesus. They don't want to honor Jesus, they want to undermine him, right? We need to see through their rhetoric. We need to make sure that everyone understands that the Islamic narrative of Jesus is a complete lie and understand there's a contradiction that cannot be reconciled. These are not brother faiths, these are not cousins, these are utterly contradictory enemies at this foundational, founders, and doctrinal level.
Correct. And whoever that Isa is has absolutely nothing to do with Jesus of the Bible. So
Correct.
that that
I mean,
that,
it's like
that
President Benkins. Like, who the heck is that? It's President Trump, right? It's like, who is this Benkins character that
so
I'm talking about?
even if they use the same name, the description of the character,
Totally different.
second to Muhammad, a creature who couldn't have one single disciple to actually follow him, and every single disciple apostle he appointed was fake. So
Yep.
it's like, how kind of a failure of the messenger you have when not a single message. And he was supposed to, according to Islam, to be the guardian of the Torah. And he failed in that job too, because he was supposed to have received the gospel and protected the Torah, which he didn't. And whatever we
Yeah.
have
You know,
200 years
this
before, we try.
this Injil that Muslims claim, why has not a single scrap of this book survived? Not a single piece of paper with just a few words in it. Not a single mention in any of the surrounding countries or any scholar or any historian or any religious writing of any nature has a quote from this Injil. There's literally zero evidence that an Injil ever existed.
Because
Nothing.
Muhammad grew up in oral culture, and he was listening to servants and slaves who are from
But
Roman
it's a book
Empire.
from Allah. It's something that Allah sent down. Why didn't they preserve
I'm
Allah's writing?
sorry, I'm not buying it. I
So
I
yeah,
I I know I don't do sarcasm. It takes me a second to get it.
yeah, no, it's just so look, I have two more articles, but I think we should skip those, maybe do a different day. I think we've covered a lot here. Yeah, Muhammad cheated on his wives by sleeping with Maryam. the slave girl, yeah, and he got caught. He was an adulterer. Yes, he was. In fact, he gets called an adulterer in the Sirah. He actually literally gets called. It says this man is he's a womanizer. So yeah, he actually gets literally called a womanizer in the Sirah.
And the Sirah, when it comes to his wife, there is actually a very interesting common phrase in all of them, and she was beautiful. Whichever wife is talking about, and she was beautiful, with the exception of one, Sauda bint Zam'a. The rest of them, and she was beautiful.
Right. So he was a womanizer. So guys, I think we should end here. I think I'll end here. Hopefully this has been an educational stream for those of you. I hate getting distracted, and I get annoyed with yeah. I've done these talks on atheism. I've dissected Darwin. I spent hours and hours, months researching and reading Darwin, getting his letters, getting hold of the latest research and available materials on Darwin to show that. And if you read Hitler, you read the World War One, the guys who ran Germany at the time of World War One, all of them were inspired by Darwin. Social Darwinism isn't some aberration that appeared later. Darwin was a social Darwinist. Darwin's children were all involved in the social Darwinist movement. And the argument that the Shlomo guy made that, yeah, but that term social eugenics was actually invented in much hundreds of years after. It doesn't matter.
It's the implication of ideology. That's the whole point.
I mean, the word Trinity is not in the Bible.
When you have an ideology, what happens when you actually implement such ideology? Regardless of what name you're going to put in it, regardless of you're going to call it eugenics or social Darwinism or social justice. I don't care for the name. You have certain ideology, and what that means in reality, how that's going to be implemented. And to implement Darwin is you get Margaret Sanger, and you get the eugenics, and you get Hitler.
You get Mao, you get Stalin, you get Lenin, you get
pogroms. I'm not sure Stalin was Darwinism, because the guy was too stupid to read anything.
The problem is that, again, he inherited an ideology that was ultimately it's baked in. That you don't have to be a Darwinist; it's baked in already. You're just following the recipe, and you don't have to know about what the ingredients are. You're just eating the cake. It's simple as that. So
here's the irony with the Shlomo comment. As a Darwinist, he shouldn't be upset with you, because as a Darwinist, he believes survival of the fittest, and you got the bigger gun, you can ban him. So there you go.
Yeah, but also he's a materialist, and he believes that there's no free will. So therefore, I have no free will. I have no choice in this. Neither does he.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm sorry, the guy must be high, whatever he's on.
Sorry, these things annoy me. I've just gotten sick and tired of so many things. But once you go through the actual history in detail carefully, you start to come with a completely different view. So guys, I'll call it a night here, I believe, Ibn al-Warraq, and maybe we can pick this up later in the week, like Wednesday or something. If you're available. So guys, I'll do the rest of it. I got a couple of articles. One is, pardon me. One that deserves time to go through it carefully is that Allah and Yahweh have fundamentally opposed natures. These two deities are not cousins or friends or brothers or just a mirror image of it. They are complete opposites. They are day and night, good versus evil. This is the one who stepped out of the bath in the shower where he just had this really nice scrub done, and the other one was lying down in the mud, and just is covered in mud and filth. That's the difference between these two. Philosophically,
or at least one of them is unknowable to start with.
There's that, but exactly. It's just they are complete opposites. They are irreconcilable. They are irreconcilable. There is no way to reconcile these two deities.
Logically, they are not in the same book. They are not in the same library.
Yeah. So that's something we can talk about more carefully and more slowly, because I think it's something we have to understand. But hopefully you've enjoyed this little discussion we've had, and you're understanding the Shariah, how it relates to how you've got Quranic verses, but that applies to doctrine. Doctrine sits at above the level of Islam, Quran verses, right? These verses are interpreted, they're applied, and then there's history of their usage, and eventually it creates doctrine, and this doctrine becomes habit. It becomes law. It becomes the way that things are done in Islamic society, the way that things are understood and practiced. And that understanding and that practice is in the Sharia, and that's the highest level of understanding. The Sharia is the final product of the Islamic theological development, of the historical and social and cultural and legal development. And the whole point of the Sharia is to create and maintain a caliphate.
Or the implementation of what actually Islam teaches. If it's
Yes.
implemented, that's what you're going to get.
Yes. So guys, I'll leave it here. So guys, thank you all very much for spending the time with us. And hopefully you've learned something. Please talk about these things. The articles are on my X account. In the articles page, you'll see the link on the left. Read them, share them. Please talk about these things. And we need to get away from the Quran. You need to understand the implementation. And the Sharia, the explanatory power is extraordinary. It explains everything. There's no need to argue about verse A means this, and a Muslim says, yeah, but verse B cancels that because it says the opposite, so you're wrong. No, the Sharia fixes that problem. So yeah, guys, good night and goodbye. God bless, and we'll see you all soon. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.